I've had a lot of people ask me recently about the build that I'm using, more specifically to kill the Arbiter of Ash, as well as the Trials of Sekhemos. If you're interested in watching those videos, definitely check them out. But without further ado, I bring you all the Blood Mage Bleed build. There's been a lot of guides on this build as a whole, and I do have to give credits to the original authors of the build, which were Shahan Tai, I believe is his name. This build was theorized before Dawn of the Hunt actually was released, in terms of the passive tree as well as the build itself, and then when the leak came out, a lot of people decided to take advantage of the build. I was one of the first people, thankfully. I sort of took a gamble on this build. I saw some videos. I didn't know if it was going to be good or not. Turns out, in my opinion, I personally believe that this is the best bossing and pinnacle content build in the game, and it can be very strong at mapping as well. So without further ado, we will get into the build itself. I'm going to go over the Ascendancy, how the build functions and works, and then some of the jewels, the passive tree, as well as the abilities that we are using. We are using Rake as a primary ability, and Lightning Spear for mapping, followed by some other abilities as well, which I will get into later. But to start with the Ascendancy itself, we have Blood Mage, obviously, and this is a bleed-based build. We go over off into the right, we take Grasping Wounds, which gives us significant survivability. 25% of life loss from hits is prevented, and then that much life is lost over 4 seconds instead. So this is basically just 25% of damage taken is prevented. We come down here, and this is probably one of the most important parts of the Ascendancy, is this Blood Barbs passive right here. Bleeding you inflict on cursed targets is aggravated, and elemental damage also contributes to bleeding magnitude. Now, the reason why this is so important is that for those who don't know, aggravated bleeding is basically bleeding that does twice as much damage. Normally, in order to aggravate bleeding, the target has to be moving. A lot of pinnacle bosses and rare monsters and just monsters in general in the game won't be moving, and so the bleeding on them normally won't be aggravated. But this Ascendancy point always make sure that it's aggravated if the target is cursed. So we will be taking advantage of some curses in this build, such as Enfeeble. There are other curses you can use as well. And then another important part of Blood Barbs is that elemental damage also contributes to bleeding magnitude. Now this is very important because bleeding magnitude is essentially the amount of bleeding damage that you deal. Elemental damage normally doesn't affect that. Normally it's just physical damage, and the only way to really get physical damage is on your weapon as well as your gloves and your rings, but you're able to get a lot more elemental damage on those items than you are able to get physical damage, right? And so elemental damage contributing to bleeding magnitude is very strong and very important. Now the last Ascendancy point that is very important is Gore Spike over here. 1% increased critical damage bonus per 40 life, which essentially makes this build a life-based evasion build as opposed to an energy shield build. In order to maximize the effectiveness of this build, you do want as much max life as possible, which also functions with Sanguimancy right here. Skills gain a base life cost equal to base mana cost and grant skill life remnants. Now what life remnants does is it's essentially the old Grim Feast. Every time you critically hit a target or you kill a target, there's a chance to spawn a life remnant, which significantly heals you. And so as a result, even though right here you can see I only have 2,500 life, we can actually get up to 5,000 life overhealing. And yeah, it's a very, very strong Ascendancy skill point, because as long as you're critically hitting, which is not hard to do with the Tangle Tongue, you are always healing yourself. And I'll show you guys in a little bit when I run some pinnacle content what that translates into and what it actually looks like, right? So those are the Ascendancy points. Really, the main takeaways are that you want to have as much elemental damage as possible. You want to utilize a curse, and you really want to utilize critical strike chance as well as max life for more critical damage bonus, right? Those are the main takeaways from the Ascendancy itself. To get into the actual passive tree, if you guys just wanted to take a picture of this Ascendancy and copy it, I am level 95. I have not bothered to go to any higher level. There are definitely more points that you could utilize. Especially in the mapping variation of this build, you can come down here into block chance and block recovery are both very, very strong, right? But other than that, this is the passive tree. We're basically in the passive tree just trying to get as much critical hit chance and critical damage bonus as possible, as well as any nodes that mention us dealing more damage to targets on full life, because obviously we're trying to one-shot targets, enemies, whether it's a white, rare, blue monster, or a unique boss. We're trying to maximize our damage when they're at full life, which is, again, a pretty important part of this build, and being able to one-shot. Now, we do come up here, we do take Killer Instinct. This is a notable passive to take because essentially we will be doing 30% more damage as long as we are full life. Now, because our skills have a base life cost, that actually causes us to lose life. So every time before we use an ability, we are going to want to use our ultimate life flask or whatever you have in order to maximize your damage. And just to show you guys what that looks like, when I use an ability and we look at my rake damage up here, it's at 29,000. If I click the well, it goes back up to 32,000, right? So just a little important note to keep in mind. Again, this is the entire Ascendancy node. I'm not going to go into each passive, every passive and what it does. If you wanted to just copy it directly, you can. Now, when it comes to the jewels for this build, they can get quite expensive. You don't really need maximum energy shield. You don't need evasion. We actually don't hit any energy shield nodes in the entire build. That's because, like I said, this build functions a lot better with life only. The more energy shield you have, the less value you're getting out of your Ascendancy itself. And obviously, the more evasion you have, the more effective health you're going to have. To compare this to something like a Deadeye that might have 50% evasion but 10,000 energy shield, that translates into around 20,000 effective health. If we take a look at this build, we are able to, with specific gear, get up to around 90% evasion, which can get a little bit expensive, factoring in max life on items as well. But you'll see, and I'd have to swap over to my buckler as well. But you can see we're able to get a lot more evasion, and what this translates into is a lot more effective health, especially with max life. With 3,000 life and around 90% of evasion, we're looking at around 27,000 effective health. So it is significantly better to stack evasion with life than it is to worry about ever acquiring any amount of energy shield on this build. So just a little heads up, definitely stay away from energy shield evasion body armors, which I'll get into later as well. But as I was saying, the gems can get a little bit expensive. You don't need evasion, you don't need you don't need energy shield on the gems. Your main modifiers that you're looking for on gems are critical hit chance, critical damage bonus, increased elemental damage, magnitude of ailments, or any modifier that has to deal with damaging ailments that you inflict. So there's a few of them. There's just increased magnitude of damaging ailments is one of them, to name a few. I forgot what the other one is. But yeah, as you can see right here, this gem is pretty nice. I did get this towards the start of the league for relatively cheap. And if we come through here and we lower all the values on this, you will see that this gem is relatively expensive. If you're looking to get a cheaper gem, you can definitely take something like the critical hit chance off of this gem, and you'll see they go for 3 chaos to 1 divine. The critical hit chance is not entirely important. It just makes bossing a little bit more consistent, but you don't need it 100%. It's just a quality of life sort of modifier. You're not too worried about getting crit capped on this build, which is something that I'll go into in a few minutes as soon as I sell this regalia right here. Not too bad of a regalia for only 3 divines. Not perfect. Not the best, not the worst. We'll put this in the tab, and then yeah, we'll go back to the jewels. So for your just standard sapphires, like I said, critical hit chance, critical damage bonus, anything with ailments, elemental damage, and if you're looking for cheaper variants because you don't want to spend a ton on this one, like for example, I could definitely drop the elemental damage off of this one, and it's 4 divines, 10 divines. Elemental damage, again, functions with blood barbs over here, where it contributes to bleeding magnitude. So percent increased elemental damage is essentially percent increased damage ailments as well. So that's that sapphire. Another gem that is very, very nice to utilize and take advantage of is Heartstopper. Towards the start of the league, these went for around 10 divines, but at the moment they're going for around 1 chaos. Heartstopper allows you to allocate these nodes right here, and these essentially, again, increase your damage against targets that are full life, and the value from these nodes is actually significant. As you can see, 50% increased critical hit chance while enemies are on full life, 40% damage, 20% increased damage, 20% increased damage. So overall, these nodes are massive. They're extremely valuable. This build does utilize a time loss sapphire as well, and the main important modifier for this time loss sapphire here is the 25% increased effect of notable passive skills and radius, which by itself can be relatively expensive. It's a lot cheaper now at this point in the league. But essentially what this does is it amplifies these nodes right here, which are the strongest nodes in the tree. So if you get 25% increased effect, you are getting a lot of critical hit chance and critical damage bonus out of it. Now the other nodes that you'd want on this time loss sapphire would be increased elemental damage, increased crit damage bonus, increased crit hit chance, increased magnitude of ailments, anything along those lines. I do believe that this exact time loss sapphire here is relatively expensive. 20 divines is the cheapest one, all the way up to 150 divines. But you could definitely substitute out elemental damage. Again, find one for 12 chaos to a divine. Unfortunately, I did have this towards the start of the league, and these were going for around 100 divines. I did fracture it, and I hit the wrong modifier. I hit the increased chaos damage, which is useless. So this is essentially a dead time loss sapphire, but still pretty good. Overall, there's definitely better variations that you could get. There's also a lot cheaper variations you could get. Trying to think of what else. The last jewel and gem that we actually use is a Prism of Belief diamond, +3 to rake. This can be relatively expensive. You can get a +2 as well, which is relatively cheap. It'll give you around the same effect, and you don't actually need this +3 to level of all rake skills. Towards the start of the league, I was just using 2 gems that look similar to this, and my damage output was relatively the same. I think this +3 to level of all rake skills is really just a statement more than anything. It doesn't do too much, but it is very nice. And if you do plan on doing heavily afflicted trial runs where you have a ton of bad afflictions and you're still trying to bring 6 people with, I would recommend this +3 rake skill, but it's not actually needed for a lot of pinnacle bossing content or trial runs or anything like that. None of this really is. Like I said, I was running trials, Arbiter, Breachstones, etc. with very, very budget versions of this gear. I spent around 10 divines on the original build that I had, and the most expensive part of that build was the Tangle Tongue. So yeah, this is where the build's at right now. This is the passive tree. Again, if you guys wanted to copy it, if you guys want to rewind and just take a look at some of the sapphires and the jewels again, that would be great. This is the Ascendancy node. Now, that being said, with everything that I've said so far, there are 2 variations of this build. There is a one-shot variation for bossing, and there is a more sustainable, tankier version for mapping where you're still able to kill everything. That being said, on the higher end mapping version of this build, it still does struggle in group play if you are the only damage member. So I would definitely stay away from 6-man group play. With this build, with the mapping version of it, you are able to do 6-man bossing very, very easily. You're able to one-shot the boss. If you are in a group with multiple members, make sure that you are letting them get you that they're letting you hit the boss before they hit the boss, essentially, right? Sorry, that was a bit confusing, but always make sure that if you're in a group that you're the first one to hit the boss, because you are going to deal the most damage that way. Before we get into the gear, I'll go over all the skills that we use and how they function with the build. So we do have Life Remnants here, supported with Interlude, Magnetism, Precision, as well as Dissipate. So this gives us more accuracy while the skill is active, which is just overall very good because we are using Lightning Spear and Tangle Tongue as our secondary damaging ability for mapping and for clearing out any whites, rares, blue monsters, etc. Life Remnants, like I said, is very, very strong. It's very, very strong ability. It gives you so much sustainability. It's very enjoyable to play this on Pinnacle content or while mapping because you never have to worry really too much about pressing a Life Flask because you're constantly getting healed, especially with how much Tangle Tongue critically hits. It's very nice. Our main damaging ability is Rake. As you can see here, we have Momentum, Ambrosia, Deep Cuts, Concoct, and Overextend. Now, what Overextend does, or one of these abilities, makes our Rake deal more damage. So after moving at least 2 meters during a single use, the rest of that use deals 40% more damage. So one thing to keep in mind is that the more we move and the further away from the boss that we are when we go to use this ability, the more damage it will deal. That's something to keep in mind. And then also the other thing is that this ability does use flash charges, so you want to have a flask with percent increased charges on it, both life and mana flasks. As you can see, they are relatively cheap. They were a lot more expensive towards the start of the league. You can also get a mana flask with 69% increased charges on it for a round of divine. This does make a significant difference to your damage, whether or not you have these, so I would really recommend having both of these flasks, right? Our secondary ability for damage is Blood Hunt. We are using Close Combat, Tear, Behead, and that's it. Now, the thing with Blood Hunt that's important to keep in mind is that Blood Hunt will deal more damage the closer you are to your target. The other thing about Blood Hunt is that it will consume all the bleeding on the target. So let's say your Rake does 10 million damage. Blood Hunt will also do 10 million damage, but if it critically hits, it will multiply whatever damage it deals by your critical damage bonus. So let's say you only did 10% of a boss's health with Rake. Well, Blood Hunt will actually kill the boss entirely as long as you have a 1000% crit damage bonus, which is very, very nice. It's something I'll show later on in the video. The curse that we use to take advantage of our Ascendancy is Enfeeble. Enfeeble makes targets deal less damage. It's a targeted AoE curse. This is Enfeeble right here. Very, very nice curse to use as a whole. Now, like I said, our main damaging ability is Lightning Spear. We do take some different support gems in other builds. We still take Volt, Lacerate, Martial Temple, Gambo Shot, and First Blood. So the two big differences with Lightning Spear here are that we are taking Lacerate as well as First Blood, which causes our Lightning Spear to deal bleeding damage to targets, which functions very nicely with Herald of Blood. It's the Herald that we use. We take Deadly Herald, Magnified Effect, and Hemo Crystals, and essentially what Herald of Blood does is that targets that are bleeding will cause a bloody explosion that deals damage to surrounding targets. So every time you kill one monster, what tends to happen is that everything around it also dies, including rare monsters, because it just causes a chain cascade explosion to occur, which is very nice. We take Orb of Storms to build Rage on this build. We use Brutality, Font of Rage, and Ambush. And Orb of Storms essentially is just a ground ability right here. We stand in it, we build Rage. If you walk outside of it, you instantly lose your Rage. So whenever you're building Rage, you want to make sure that you're standing inside of this circle. The only time you actually have to use Orb of Storms is when you're killing a boss. So yeah, just something else to keep in mind. We do take Wind Dancer for mapping, and also personally I take it for trials and bossing. We use Blind, Arm's Length, Maim. Wind Dancer is very nice. It gives you basically flat evasion. That's why you'll see my evasion is 78%. If I take Wind Dancer off, my evasion goes down significantly to 73%, so that is a very, very nice little buff to get. Instead of Wind Dancer, you can also take Attrition if you are struggling to kill bosses. What Attrition does is gives you bonus damage to a unique monster as long as you've been in its presence for a certain amount of time. So if you're running Attrition, you don't need any support gems for it. What you basically do is you put your Orb of Storms down and you run around in a circle around the boss until your Attrition stacks up, and then you will deal even more damage to the boss. We also use Infernal Cry. Infernal Cry gives us significantly increased damage through extra fire damage. It will also generate Rage from us. At this current level, with my current gear and my current stats, Infernal Cry generates 16 Rage for me, which means that I only actually need my Font of Rage to generate 14 Rage before I can push Infernal Cry, and I will generate the rest of my Rage. Now, this also consumes 10 Rage, so generally you need around 20 Rage, but it causes your power attacks to deal more damage. And yeah, we're supporting this with Premeditation, Raging Cry, and Enraged Warcry. And like I said, you always want to try to be using this build. We're also using Disengage. Disengage will cause the target to become shocked and increase magnitude of shock. For those that don't know, shock actually increases your damage to the target, so the more shock we have on them, the more damage that we are going to be dealing. The standard rotation for this build is basically building Rage with Orb of Storms, at least for bossing, and then you will debuff the boss, you will press Infernal Warcry, you will drink a health pot to make sure that you're benefiting from additional damage from being at full life, and then you will back up from the boss, you will push Rake, and then you will disengage. Once the boss has bled a significant amount of damage, you will use Blood Hunt to consume that bleed and deal massive damage to the boss. Now, at the current state of my build, with the gear and the jewels and the passive tree that I have, I am able to 99% of the time kill bosses with just Rake. But if your Rake doesn't deal that much damage, if you don't have +3 Rake, you might have to also use Blood Hunt. That being said, to get into the gear, I'll go into all of the gear with you guys and all the different variations, cheaper, more expensive versions that you can get along the way. We are running a Tangle Tongue. A lot of people will tell you that Tangle Tongues with more physical damage and more crit chance corruptions are better. They are more consistent because if you have 100% crit chance, you are going to more consistently be dealing critical damage to the target. But with that being said, they are significantly less damage than a 2-socket 19.5% or one with a plus 15% crit damage bonus. So as you can see here, I have a 19.95 with 15% crit damage on top, 25 int, 17 to 36 fizz. I would really recommend to get at least a 19.5% with 2 sockets, Tangle Tongue, as well as at least 20 intelligence, as well as max roll physical damage, just to maximize your damage from this item. If we search the cost of this item, 19.5, 10, 20, 26.5 is only around 7 chaos to 1 divine, so it's actually relatively cheap. 2 sockets might be a bit more expensive. You might have to buy a few of these and corrupt them yourself to get a second socket, which is what I did towards the start of the league. But with that being said, these were like 10 divines towards the start of the league, uncorrupted. Thankfully, I bought 2 of them. I got a second socket on one, and I got 15% crit damage bonus on the other. This one is more damage than the other one that I have, which has more crit chance on it and more fizz. The other Tangle Tongue that I have is 18 to 36, 25, 19.98. The extra 3% critical damage bonus is like 3% overall damage. It's actually significant. But the main takeaway with the Tangle Tongue, you definitely want 2 sockets or a crit implicit. You do not want more crit chance. You don't really get that much benefit out of it in terms of damage. You just get more consistency. So if that's something you want, you can go for it. But yeah. Now, because our Ascendancy scales off of elemental damage and that affects the magnitude of bleeding that we are inflicting, we do want rings with elemental damage on them. So you'll see here I have some rings. Now, these have actually went down a lot in price due to the recent Breachstone changes. So you could definitely find like budget versions of these rings that I have right now. Like if I did 25, 15, 25, which is still a significant amount of damage, then maybe let's say we got less stats and less resistances, and we search this, you can see there are rings for 6 divines, 16 divines. I'll go into all the specifics of the damage. You don't need attributes on your rings. You get either attributes or resistances, depending on what the rest of your gear has and what's more affordable to use. So even though the rings I have attributes, you could definitely find better rings than this that have resistances. You could find better rings in general. These rings aren't too good, especially at this point in the league, but they're what work for me, and so they're what I've stuck with. Now, again, because we are stacking elemental damage and physical damage, you definitely want your rings to have at least physical damage on them, and then either fire, cold, or lightning as the damage. We are going to be using Ingenuity just to take advantage of the extra 30% damage that we get from it, because it'll be increasing our rings by 30%. You'll see I have here a 30-34. I did corrupt this one myself. However, you don't actually need a 30-34. You can get like a 29-29 for significantly less, and the difference is going to not even be noticeable. And depending on the corruption that you're looking for on your Ingenuity, if I just search a 29-29 right here and take that reduced charges off, you can see it's only about 1 divine for 29-29. You can get corruptions that have resistances on them, stats, or you can get an evasion % corruption as well. It all comes down to what you actually need for your build. Now, we do have a 3 charm slot utility, and we do take advantage of Fall of the Axe Silver Charm. These used to be around 70 divines. They're only 4 divines right now. Yet again, another investment that I lost a lot of money on. But again, this is a very, very nice charm to have. It grants onslaught whenever you're slowed, so instead of being slowed, you will just be sped up whenever you're hit by a slow. We also use Nagamahu's Chosen, I don't know how to pronounce that, Ruby Charm. This activates whenever we take fire damage from a hit. It's going to grant up to our maximum rage on use. This is really good because when you're doing pinnacle content like the Arbiter or any content in general, there's a chance you're going to take fire damage. This will just randomly give you your maximum rage, especially if you lost it or if you didn't have any. So it's just a very nice charm to have. And then for your last charm, I run a golden charm. There's a bunch that you could run. It all kind of depends on what you struggle with. You could run a thawing charm. If you're struggling with getting frozen, you could run an anti-bleed charm. You could also run a golden charm, Rite of Passage, the unique one. I would definitely look for the more expensive ones that give you increased damage, such as the cat charm are very good, but they are a few hundred divines as well. So you'll notice up here I am using Crown of Eyes with a focus. This is the bossing variant of this build. So the bossing variant uses Crown of Eyes, and the way that Crown of Eyes works is it's going to give us more damage to our attacks based off of our spell damage increases, right? And so I have a focus right here that has 116% increased spell damage on it, which is basically just a 116% flat physical damage increase, which is why I said that you want a Tangle Tongue, which is with as much physical damage on it as possible. You also want rings with as much physical damage on them as possible, because your focus and your Crown of Eyes are going to be interacting with those and making them significantly stronger. The other modifier that you want in your focus to go with Crown of Eyes is you want a % damage modifier, such as fire, lightning, or cold, based on whatever damage you have most on your rings and gloves. So let's say your highest damage on your rings and your gloves was lightning damage. You'd want % increased lightning damage. If it was cold damage, you'd want % increased cold damage. And because mine is fire damage, I have % increased fire damage. So I have tier 1 fire on my gloves, tier 1 fire on my rings. One thing that I will say is that lightning damage % increases have higher highs and lower lows than fire damage. Fire damage rolls very, very high, 30 to 43, and averages out, for example, at like 37 damage. Whereas the lightning may still average out at 37, but it adds 2 to 68. So there's times where you'll add only 4 damage and times where you'll add 68. And so, like I said, it has higher highs and lower lows when it comes down to an actual damage increase. So yeah, that's the rings, the helmet, the focus. For an amulet, you want +3 to level of all melee skills, ideally, and crit damage bonus. Earlier on in the league, I was using a budget version of this amulet, and this is essentially the cost of that. To get +3 with 20% crit damage is 1 divine. I would really recommend to have life on the amulet as well. You can see there's currently one for sale for 10 div, but otherwise they are 1 div, but there are some for 10 div. Max life, again, functions with the Ascendancy, and the more evasion that you have combined with maximum life, the more effective health you're going to have. You can see that mine right here, I have % increased maximum life, flat max life. I also have increased spell damage to go along with Crown of Eyes and the focus. And then this modifier down here at the bottom, unfortunately, I'm not able to get rid of. I bought this amulet like this for 50 divines, but this is actually a very good modifier. Damage taken recouped is life, and the reason why is that on an flat life evasion build, it's basically just flat damage reduction. If we're only taking damage in the form of life, but we're getting 25% back, it essentially just means 25% less damage taken. Your body armor is the piece of armor that you get the most evasion from in terms of your evasion % up here. So I have 11,000 evasion, 78%. With this variation of the build, if I put my other gear on for mapping, it goes up to 84%. And as you can see, we have around 14,000, but 99% of that comes from your body armor. And so you want a body armor with the most amount of evasion possible on it, as well as the highest max life roll that you can possibly get. However, even though that might seem a little bit daunting, I'll show you guys here. I actually have a couple good body armors for sale myself. Evasion pieces don't really sell for that much because no one really uses them, at least not right now. And so as a result, you're able to get evasion pieces for relatively cheap. Some of these I do have it listed for a bit more just because that's what I paid for them. I used to use these pieces of gear before I upgraded. So yeah, I would ideally look for around 2,000 evasion. 1,900 to 1,800 is fine. 1,600 even is fine when you're first starting off with the build. And then, like I said, whether or not it has resistances or attributes on it depends on what your rings have and vice versa. So yeah, we will put these boots back on, the Crown of Eyes back on. The last piece of gear are the gloves. Now on the gloves, you definitely want +2 to level of all melee skills. You also want crit damage bonus. I would really recommend having max life. One little note is that if you don't have at least 2,400 max life, you will get one shot occasionally by bosses such as the Arbiter or the King in the Mist, Audience with the Kings. They do have abilities that deal roughly 2,400 damage, and so you do need a certain amount of max life for this build to actually function and work, which is why I have max life on these gloves as opposed to a third damage modifier. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. We use increased magnitude of damaging ailments as the socket, but the main modifiers for the gloves are the +2 to level of all melee skills and the crit damage bonus. If you don't want to invest too much in the gloves, you can always try recombining and making these yourself, which is how I actually made this pair. +2 to level of all melee skills and crit damage bonus is relatively cheap, but it gets very expensive as you start adding other modifiers on there. As you can see, though, you can get a pair of gloves. Like, these are ridiculously expensive, but you can maybe lower this down to 5, and yeah, there's a pair for 1 divine. And then obviously the last modifier, you get rarity on these if you really want to. You'll notice I don't really have any rarity on my gear. You can get rarity on it if you want to, on your rings, your boots, your gloves, etc. I don't really need or use it for pinnacle content or bossing or trials, so I reserve that for my mapping gear. As you can see here, we have rarity on our boots, our helmet, as well as some of the rings that I have that I use for mapping as well, such as this ring right here, which I also crafted myself. If you guys are interested in a video in terms of how to craft gear for yourself throughout the league, definitely let me know, because I was able to craft almost all this gear I have on for a fraction of the price. Even the Ingenuity, at the time, these were going for around 20 divines. Obviously, the price of everything has dropped a lot. But yeah, the main modifiers, like I said, are levels to melee skills, crit damage bonus, and then as much damage as you can get on any piece of gear. Now, with that being said, I will show you guys that even with no damage on most pieces, or not being able to use most of your abilities, that this build is still very strong. Right now, I am sitting at around 32,000 damage on Rake. If I do swap over to the mapping variation of this build, that goes down significantly. It goes down to around 19.5 thousand. I'll show you guys what both variations of the build look like on Pinnacle boss content, just so you can kind of gauge an idea of how strong the build is. For the mapping variation of this build, we do take advantage of a buckler, again with maximum life on it, as much evasion as possible. And also you can look for block chance, like a 36% block chance of buckler that also has 300 to 400 evasion and then decent resistances. The helmet for the mapping version, I like it to have rarity, critical hit chance, just so that we are killing things more effectively and getting more life back from life remnants, as well as some resistances. And then same thing with the boots. Boots with a lot of evasion and life on them can be very expensive. As you can see here, I do have some budget pieces of gear in terms of the helmet and the boots. But yeah, you definitely don't need gear this good. You definitely don't need this gear this strong. I would just really recommend to be res capped and to have as strong of gear as possible that you can possibly acquire. So we'll do some Pinnacle boss content here just to show you guys and give you an idea of the build itself and how strong it is. I'll come to Alva, we'll talk to her, we will buy some breach stones. I'll show you guys on Zesht. If you are interested in seeing what this build looks like on the Arbiter or the Trials of Secumus, definitely go check out those videos. Personally, with where my build is currently at, I am able to kill the Trials boss in a group of 6 people in one shot, no matter what afflictions I have. And I'm able to kill the Arbiter in one hit, regardless of how many people are in the group as well. But I'll show you Zesht. Just to make it a little bit simple, we'll get 2 of these for 3 chaos, just so I can show you both variations of the build. I already had one, unfortunately. We'll go here, and we'll head directly into our breach stones. This is tier 4. I'll show you guys right here, tier 4 Zesht. We'll go into the Twisted Domain. Now, like I said, once you get this build to a certain point of how strong it is, you don't really need to use the mapping version of the build, and the Crown of Eyes version definitely feels really good, but like I said, I wouldn't use this for too much unless I had at least 2,500 life. You do lose a little bit of life from Crown of Eyes, but as you can see right away, we don't really have to press any abilities while mapping. We just have to press Lightning Spear, and if we fail to kill something like a rare, we can come back through and use Blood Hunt on it. Blood Hunt will steal rare modifiers from rare monsters every now and then when you kill them, so that is a sort of benefit of this build, is that you basically have a headhunter at the same time. And then as you can see here, basically every time I hit anything, it just explodes, it kills everything. I'm not losing any max life at all because my evasion is so high, and my life remnants are just consistently healing me, right? So I could actually stand still for quite a bit with this build and live. A lot of people, like I said, seem to think the energy shield is the best, and from my experience, it's just not. If you can stack enough evasion with enough life, it's actually significantly stronger than any amount of energy shield, and you have a lot more effective health. The only downside is that if you are getting hit by like 20 abilities at one time, and multiple of them hit you at the same time, you are probably going to die, right? But as you can see, no problem clearing the actual mapping variation of breach stones. We're just tearing right through everything. Again, this build is a little bit expensive where it's currently at. It's definitely not the strongest one in the game. There are a lot stronger variations of this build. You could definitely have rings that are like 40% better. You could have these that are breach rings. It just turns out that all the gear that I have just works together really well, and this is the outcome that I was able to come across and get. So yeah, we'll keep powering through this breach zone. We're about to be at the boss. I don't teleport out after or before getting to the boss, and the reason why is that it will reset your life remnants overheal. Zesht and the King and the Mist can both hit for a significant amount of damage, and so making sure that you maintain your overheal is actually, it can be pretty important sometimes. And as you can see, rarity doesn't really affect pinnacle boss content. We're still getting a ton of rares, tier 4 breach rings, etc., which are how you get tier 1 rules and whatnot. So we'll head into Zesht. Now fortunately, Zesht has a pretty long starting intermission, and so you can start the fight and then put your Orb of Storms down, and we don't really have to worry about pressing a health pot when we use our abilities here. Since we're overhealed, we are losing health, but again, we're overhealed. We'll debuff him, we will Infernal Warcry, we'll back up, we'll press Rake, we'll disengage, and as you can see, he's dead. I didn't even have to use Blood Hunt. I will show you guys what Blood Hunt looks like with the mapping variation of the build, but very, very strong build. We kill Zash in one hit. It's very nice. No loot, as always. This boss kind of sucks. The only good loot are the rare items that drop, the catalysts, and the breach rings, obviously. We'll go back to our hideout, and I'll put the mapping gear on now just to show you guys what it looks like with half as much damage. One thing to keep in mind with this mapping variant that I do have at the moment is that I can't actually use Infernal Warcry with this setup because my gear is a little bit outdated. So we'll put this on and you'll see I can't use Infernal Warcry, so that's 150% less damage I'm going to be doing, on top of the fact that I'm already dealing half as much damage. So hopefully this gives you guys an idea of how strong the build really is now that I am literally doing 3 times less damage. I'll also show you guys what the build looks like on the audience with the King as well, because that's another pinnacle boss fight that people like to do. Again, if you want to see it at the Arbiter or the Trials, definitely let me know. Now this build does less damage, and it's harder to get the mapping variant to work, especially in party play. You're not always really powering through and dealing a ton of damage, but yeah, we will power through this. As you can see, still not struggling. We're still killing everything. It might be dying a little bit slower, but we're not taking damage. We have nothing really to worry about. We just keep killing stuff and keep pushing forward. And like I said, you don't really ever have to use any other abilities. Sometimes you might have to use Blood Hunt, like on that rare that I just hit right there, especially if you want to benefit from some of their modifiers, such as Haste or Temporal Aura, Bubble, whatever it's called. You might want to press Blood Hunt. Sometimes you won't be able to because the monster will just die instantly regardless. But again, all of this is coming into play because of our passive tree and our increased damage on enemies at full life. This is why I think Mind Over Matter and some of the other gems are just bad, is because even though they might on paper give you more damage, the value of Heartstopper is just incredible. You're basically always dealing 3 times more damage to targets that have full health, which is every target that you ever hit, right? So I really like Heartstopper. I think it's a really valuable gem. And yeah, like I said, it's pretty cheap. I've got like 6 of them, and I thought I had gotten rich from getting them, and then I price checked them again, and they are literally 1 Chaos Orb. They might have went up in price since I last checked. I don't know. Maybe they went down. Maybe you can get them for even cheaper. Who knows? You'll never know until you look into it. Coming towards the end of this breach zone, as you can see, I didn't kill that rare monster there in 1 hit, so we come back through. We push Blood Hunt on him. Very simple, very straightforward. And looks like we just got tier 1, tier 0 unique. I've never seen those before. Maybe it's tier 0. I don't really know. 3 charm wide belt. I'm just going to leave it on the ground. And then generally with breach stones, I do come through and I try to pick up some of the rare items that could identify well or be potential recombinator items. So such as these wands or the Vile Robe, etc. I don't think Rambler Jacket can be that good though. We'll come into Zesh, and as you can see, I have no Infernal Warcry. I'm still going to build up my Rage. I'm still going to debuff the boss. I'm still going to disengage, but I'm dealing about 300% less damage right now than I normally would. So we'll come in here, we'll debuff, we'll walk back, we'll hit him, and as you can see, we deal a lot, and then boom, we can push Rake, and the boss is dead. Very simple, very straightforward. Very nice, very strong build that you could definitely have some very budget gear with and still be doing a lot of damage. Obviously, like I said, it's going to look like some of my gear is relatively expensive, but most of it was bought towards League Start when not too many people knew about this build. It is one that I found on Mobalytics or one of those websites relatively early on in the league. Are these worth anything? 5 Exalted Orbs. I have a feeling, yeah, that's a month ago. So these are worth a little bit of money, not too bad. Come through the loot here, sell all this because it is all garbage. And then we'll take a look at the breach rings. This one does have 45% rarity on it, but it does have a dead mob, or dead mod. This one is actually pretty good. I think that's tier 1 fizz. Yeah, tier 1 fizz, tier 1 rarity. Pretty bad suffixes, who knows. And then we also got tier 1 lightning. So chances are I will slam this. It's going to get 2 bad modifiers on it. And then what we can do is, this is actually tier 2 lightning. We can come here and we can reforge these two. And hopefully we land the recombination. Unfortunately, we don't have enough artifacts. I'm not going to worry about it. But yeah, anyways, hopefully you guys like the build. Hopefully you learned something. And if you have any questions, definitely let me know down in the comments below. If you guys are looking for budget variations of the build, budget gear, if you want to know if something's going to work or not, let me know. I'll answer any and all questions. I will, give any recommendations or any suggestions if you guys want to post your own builds. Because as I said, I am pretty experienced with this build at this point in the league. I've been using it for a while. I really enjoy it. I think, in my opinion, it is the best build this league for pinnacle bossing and just content as a whole. It may not be the most fun build. It's not the strongest at mapping. You will get a little bit more value out of a Deadeye, but it's a lot more consistent at bossing than a Deadeye. One last thing that I will say is that, like I said, you don't have to worry too much about crit chance, especially from a Tingle Tongue that is over-corrupted. Do not fall into the scam of paying for one that has 24% or 23% crit chance. At the moment, with the gear that I currently have, the jewels and the gems and everything else, we are sitting at 92% crit chance for our main hand weapon, which means that if we kill a boss, and I guess it's 96% with our helmet, with our mapping gear, but if we put on our Crown of Eyes, it goes down a bit. You don't actually need 100% or anywhere close to that. This means that 8 out of 100 times we won't kill it with our first rake, but we'll still be able to use rake again. If rake doesn't crit, chances are blood hunt will, and yeah, you'll be chilling. So don't fall into the trap of getting some crazy Tangled Tongue that's over corrupted. Just look for a double socket or extra crit damage bonus as an implicit on it. For your actual gems in your gear, your sockets, like I said, gloves, you want damaging ailments. Boots, you don't need movement speed if you're doing pinnacle content. I just wanted it. I paid like 30 divines for each rune. When they first came out, it was pretty expensive. For the amulet, we are looking at barbaric strength distillation or installation. And then the rest of our gear, you're just going to put resistance sockets in as well as maximum life sockets. Depending on how many maximum life percent modifiers you have, flat life will be better or worse. You'll just have to socket it and see. Percent max life is a bit more expensive, so I would recommend starting with just plus 40 max life is a good starting point for your jewels. I think 2% increased maximum life with this current build only gives me like 44 maximum life, so it's barely better, right? But it is a little bit better depending on whether or not you have percent max life on your amulet. But like I said, hopefully you guys are able to build this build out for cheap and have a chance to try. You might have to start with some budget gear, do some trials, do some pinnacle content, make some money, and then slowly buy upgrades, which is what I did. We will, I guess, as the last part of this video, without an Omen of Corruption, corrupt this, and ooh, we got Massive Ring, -10, -15. Unfortunately, it's only worth 10 chaos. Earlier today, I actually corrupted one of these. I think I saved it. I thought it was hilarious. We corrupted it and we hit no ring, which I had never seen before. I don't know if it just rolled 0 or if it rolled off entirely, but I listed it for a mirror as sort of a meme museum item as a result. But yeah, we did get one of these earlier with no ring on it and -20 LE and -23 chaos. So it's literally the very worst possible roll with no ring at all. But yeah, anyways, like I said, thanks for tuning in, guys. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, let me know down below. Otherwise, like the video, subscribe, comment. I really appreciate it. It does mean a lot to me. Peace out.